Hey everybody, I'm back, and thankfully my throat's doing a lot better, so hopefully this video will have less pauses in it for water. Chapter 7, The Château d'If. As he passed through the antechamber, the commissary of police made a sign to two gendarmes, who instantly placed themselves on either side of Dantes. A door communicating with the law courts was opened. They passed down one of those long, dark passages which make all those who enter them give an involuntary shudder. In the same way as Villefort's chambers communicated with the law courts communicated with the prison, that somber edifice overlooking the clock tower of the Acule. They wound their way along the passage, and at last they came to a door. The commissary knocked on it, thrice with an iron knocker, and it seemed to Dantes as if each blow had been aimed at his heart. The door was opened, the gendarmes gave their hesitating prisoner a push forward. Dantes crossed the formidable threshold, and the door closed behind him with a loud bang. He now breathed a different air, a thick and mephitic air. He was in a prison. His cell was clean enough, though it was barred and bolted, and its appearance did not fill him with any dread. Why should it? The words of the deputy, who seemed to show so much interest in him, rang in his ears like a sweet promise of hope. It was 4 o'clock when Dantes was taken to his cell, and as it was the 1st of March, the prisoner soon found himself in utter darkness. With the loss of sight, his hearing became more acute. At the least sound, he rose quickly and advanced toward the door in the firm conviction that they had come to set him free. But the noise died away in another direction, and Dantes sank back onto his stool. At last, about 10 o'clock, when Dantes was beginning to lose all hope, he heard steps approaching his door. A key was turned in the lock, the bolts creaked, the massive oak door swung open, and a dazzling light from 2 torches flooded the cell. By the light of these torches, Dantes saw the glittering swords and carbines of 4 gendarmes. "Have you come to fetch me?" Dantes asked. "Yes," was the answer of one of the men. "By order of the deputy?" "I should say so." "Very well," said Dantes. "I am ready to follow you." In the belief that they came at the deputy's orders, Dantes, relieved of all apprehension, calmly stepped forward and placed himself in their midst. A police van was waiting at the door, the coachman was on the box, and a police officer was seated beside him. The door of the carriage was opened, and Dantes was pushed in. He had neither the power nor the intention to resist, and he found himself in an instant seated between 2 gendarmes, the other 2 taking their places opposite, and the heavy van lumbered away. The prisoner glanced at the windows. They were grated. He had but changed his prison. Only this one moved, and was conveying him he knew not whither. Through the grating, the bars of which were so close that there was barely a hand's breadth between them, Dantes recognized the Rue Casseret, and saw that they were passing along the Rue Saint-Laurent and the Rue Tramay toward the quay. Soon he saw the lights of the Consigne before him. The van stopped. The officer got down from the box and opened the locked door with his key, whereupon Dantes stepped out and was immediately surrounded by the 4 gendarmes, who led him along a path lined with soldiers to a boat which a customs house officer held by a chain near the quay. The soldiers looked at Dantes with vacant curiosity. He was given a place in the stern of the boat and was again surrounded by the 4 gendarmes, whilst the officer stationed himself at the bows. The boat was shoved off, 4 oarsmen piled the oars vigorously, and soon Dantes found himself in what they called the Friul, that is, outside the harbor. His first feeling on finding himself once more in the open air was one of joy, for did it not mean freedom? But the whole proceeding was incomprehensible to him. "Whither are you taking me?" he asked. "You will know soon enough, but we are forbidden to give you any explanation." Dantes knew from experience that it was useless to question a subordinate who had been forbidden to answer any questions, and he remained silent. As he sat there, the most fantastic thoughts passed through his mind. It was not possible to undertake a long voyage in such a small boat, so perhaps they were going to take him a short distance from the coast and tell him that he was free. They had not attempted to handcuff him, which he considered to be a good augury. Besides, had not the deputy who had been so kind to him told him that, provided he did not mention the fatal name of Noirtier, he had nothing to fear? Had not de Villefort destroyed the dangerous letter in his presence, the letter which was the only evidence they had against him? He waited in silence and deep in thought. With that faraway look in his eyes peculiar to sailors, he tried to pierce the depths of night. Leaving Rotono Island with its lighthouse on their right and keeping close to the coast, they arrived opposite the Catalan Creek. It was here that Mercedes lived, and now and then he imagined he saw the indistinct and vague form of a woman outlined on the dark shore. Why did a presentiment not warn her that the man she loved was but 100 yards away from her? If he gave a shout, she could hear him. A false shame restrained him, however. What would these men say if he called out like a madman? In spite of the repugnance he felt at putting fresh questions to the gendarme, he turned to the one nearest to him and said, "Comrade, I adjure you on your honor as a soldier to have pity on me and answer. I am Captain Dantes, an honest and loyal Frenchman, though accused of treason. Whither are you taking me? Tell me, and on my honor as a sailor I will submit to my fate." The gendarme scratched his ear and looked at his comrade. The latter made a motion with his hand which seemed to say, "I can't see any harm in telling him now," and the gendarme, turning to Dantes, replied, "You are a native of Marseille and a sailor, and yet you ask us where we are heading for?" "Yes, for on my honor I do not know." "Have you no idea?" "None at all." "Impossible." "I swear to it by all that I hold most sacred. Tell me, I entreat you. Unless you are blind or have never been outside the port of Marseille, you must know. Look around you." Dantes got up and quite naturally looked in the direction the boat was moving. Before him, at a distance of 100 fathoms, rose the black, steep rock on which stood the frowning Château d'If. This strange pile, this prison whose very name spelt terror, this fortress around which Marseille had woven its legends for the past 300 years, rising up so suddenly before Dantes, had the effect on him that the sight of a scaffold must have on a condemned man. "My God," he cried, "the Château d'If, why are we going there?" The gendarme smiled. "You cannot be taking me there to imprison me," Dantes went on. "The Château d'If is a state prison. It is only used for important political offenders. I have committed no crime. Are there any judges or magistrates at the Château d'If?" "As far as I know, there are a governor, some gaolers, a garrison, and some good thick walls." "Are you trying to make out that I am to be imprisoned there? What about Monsieur Villefort's promise?" "I don't know anything about Monsieur Villefort's promise. All I know is that we are going to the Château d'If." Quick as lightning, Dantes sprang to his feet and tried to hurl himself into the sea, but 4 stout arms caught him before even his feet left the bottom boards of the boat. With a howl of rage, he fell back. The next moment, a sudden impact shook the boat from stem to stern, and Dantes realized that they had arrived. His guardians forced him to land and dragged him to the steps that led to the gate of the fortress, the police officer following him with fixed bayonet. Dantes made no useless resistance. His slow movements were caused by inertia rather than opposition. He was dazed and reeled like a drunken man. He saw more soldiers stationed along the slope. He felt the steps which forced him to raise his feet. He perceived that he passed under a door, and that this door closed behind him, but all his actions were mechanical, and he saw as through a mist. He could distinguish nothing. He did not even see the ocean, that cause of heartbreaking despair to the prisoners who look on that wide expanse of water with an awful conviction that they are powerless to cross it. There was a moment's halt, during which he tried to collect his thoughts. He looked around him. He was in a square courtyard enclosed by 4 high walls. The slow and measured tread of the sentinels was heard, and each time they passed before the light which shone from within the chateau, he saw the gleam of their musket barrels. They waited here about 10 minutes, evidently for orders. At last a voice called out, "Where is the prisoner?" "Here," one of the gendarmes replied. "Let him follow me. I will take him to his cell." "Go," said the gendarme, giving Dantes a push. The prisoner followed his guide, who led him into a subterranean room whose bare and reeking walls seemed as though impregnated with tears. A sort of lamp, standing on a stool, the wick swimming in fetid oil, illuminated the shiny walls of this terrible abode, and revealed to Dantes the features of his guide, an under-gaoler, ill-clad and of a low type. "Here is your cell for tonight," he said. "It is late and the governor is in bed. Tomorrow, when he has read the instructions regarding you, he may change your cell. In the meantime, here is some bread, and there is some water in the pitcher over there, and some straw in the corner yonder. That is all a prisoner requires. Good night." Before Dantes could think of an answer, before he had noticed where the gaoler had placed the bread and the pitcher of water, or looked at the corner where lay the straw for his bed, the fellow had taken the lamp and locked the door behind him, leaving his prisoner to the darkness and silence of the gaol. When the first rays of the sun had brought some light into the den, the gaoler returned with the information that Dantes was not to change his cell. An iron hand seemed to have nailed him to the spot where he stood the night before. He was motionless with his eyes fixed on the ground. Thus he had stood the whole night long without sleep. The gaoler advanced. Dantes did not appear to see him. He tapped him on the shoulder. Dantes shuddered and shook his head. "Have you not slept?" asked the gaoler. "I do not know," was Dantes' reply. The gaoler stared at him in astonishment. "Are you not hungry?" "I do not know," Dantes still made answer. "Do you want anything?" "I want to see the governor." The gaoler shrugged his shoulders and went out. Dantes gazed after him, stretched out his hands toward the half-open door, but the door was closed upon them. Then his whole frame was shaken with one mighty sob. The tears which choked him streamed down his cheeks. He beat his forehead against the ground. He remained a long time in prayer, and while reviewing his past life, asked himself what crime he had committed at his tender age to merit such a cruel punishment. The day passed thus. He scarcely touched his bread or water. At times he would sit absorbed in thought, at other times he would walk round and round his cell like a wild animal in cage. The next morning the gaoler again made his appearance. "Well," he said, "are you more reasonable today than you were yesterday?" Dantes made no reply. "Come now, don't lose heart. Is there anything I can do for you?" "I want to speak to the governor." "I have already told you that is impossible," the gaoler answered impatiently. "Why is it impossible?" "Because the rules of the prison do not allow it." "Then what is allowed here?" "Better food if you pay for it, a walk in the courtyard, and sometimes books." "I don't want any books. Neither do I want to walk in the courtyard, and I find my food good enough. I only desire one thing, and that is to see the governor." "If you keep bothering me with that every time I come, I shall not bring you any more food." "Well then," said Dantes, "I shall die of starvation, that's all about it." "Now look here," said the gaoler. "Don't go on brooding over the impossible in this way, or you will go mad before the end of a fortnight." "Do you think so?" was the reply. "I'm sure of it. Madness always begins like that. We have an instance of it here. There was an abbé in this cell before you came. It was through his unceasingly offering 1,000,000 francs to the governor if he would set him free that his brain was turned. Listen, I am not an abbé, neither am I mad, though I may be before long. Unfortunately, I am at present in full possession of my senses. Now I, too, have a proposal to make. I can't offer you 1,000,000 francs for the simple reason that I have not so much to give you. But I offer you 100 crowns if the next time you go to Marseille you will go to the Catalans and give a letter to a girl named Mercedes. Not even a letter, just a couple of lines. If I were to take that letter and found out, I should lose my place, which is worth 1,000 francs a year in addition to my food. So you see, I should be a fool to risk 1,000 francs for 300. Very well, said Dantes, but remember this. If you refuse to take my letter to Mercedes, or at least to tell her that I am here, I shall one day hide behind that door, and as you enter, break your head with this stool. Threats, the gaoler called out, retreating a step and placing himself on the defensive. You are certainly going mad. The abbé commented like that. In 3 days you will be raving mad. Luckily we have dungeons at the Chateau d'If. Dantes picked up the stool and swung it around his head. That's enough, the gaoler exclaimed. Since you insist on it, I will go and tell the governor. That's something like, said Dantes, putting the stool down and sitting on it with a bent head and haggard eyes as though he were really losing his senses. The gaoler went out and returned a few minutes later with 4 soldiers and a corporal. The governor's orders are that the prisoner shall be taken to the dungeon. We must put madman with madmen. 4 soldiers seized Dantes, who fell into a kind of coma, and followed them without resistance. He descended 15 steps, the door of a dungeon was opened, and he entered mumbling, "He is right. They must put madmen with madmen." Okay, the end of chapter 7, and hopefully I won't keep taking so long between chapters, and we can get this done a little bit sooner. That's how much we've read. That's how much we've got to go. Have a good day, everyone.